Welcome back to Chelsea Fan TV and welcome to another edition of the Chelsea Fan TV podcast, guys. First things first, make sure you smash the like, subscribe to Chelsea Fan TV if you are new around here, and as always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. And yes, we're in the midst of a bit of a winter break, 10 days or so off for Chelsea before the second leg of the Carabao Cup against Middlesbrough next Tuesday. But as always, there is plenty to talk about of Chelsea. Yes, the transfer window's been pretty quiet, but there are links to certain strikers, maybe a move for Karim Benzema, maybe Victor Gyökeres. But there's only one place to start. Jose Mourinho, on the day of recording, Tuesday, 16th of January, has been sacked as Roma manager. And as you can imagine, the reaction from certain sections of the Chelsea fan base has been a madness. People wanting him back. People were wanting him back before he was sacked by Roma. People still thinking a part 3 would make logical sense. But I mean, Josh, let's start with this, mate. Where do you stand on this one? Because for me, nostalgia is actually clouding any sort of logical thinking from anyone.
Where does logic come into it with Jose Mourinho when he's involved? Hey, I have to say, mate, is there anything else that could have happened in the entire world for Mauricio Pochettino to be under more pressure than Jose Mourinho getting sacked by Roma? I don't think there is. And do you know what, mate? I completely agree with you that there is a nostalgia factor to Jose, and there always will be that with Jose. Whenever he's on the market, no matter who the manager is, I can only think of maybe Carlo Ancelotti if he came back, or Conte, or whatever. Those are the only two managers that would sort of scream out, or Pep Guardiola, for God's sake, he's not coming to Chelsea, is he? They're the only managers for me that there wouldn't be a call to sort of go, well, Jose's on the market. Let's have a look at him. But I have to say, I agree with you. I do feel that there's a bit of nostalgia with Jose, and I think the Jose of 2004, 2005 is a very different Jose to that which we're looking at now. Like, you look at the successive clubs that he's had where he hasn't necessarily performed. You look at where Roma are in the league. You look at how he's, got on with people like Lukaku right now. And, you look at that squad, and, I had a look at the Roma team the other day when we were hearing those rumours about the pressure being around him. That Roma team, they're not a bad team, especially when you look at that in context of other Serie A clubs, out there in Italy. And I love Italian football, so I was watching that pretty closely. I have to say their squad is pretty good. So for them to be languishing in the position they're going, that's just as big a failure as it is for Chelsea to be in a similar position. Do you know what I mean? So I do feel that there is a bit of favoritism and nostalgia towards Jose, but you've just got to look at what he did for the club. But I can understand why there is that sort of connection with Chelsea fans, that he'll never be allowed to sort of go anywhere else. They want him back no matter what. So I get it. But mate, if it was my decision, I think you agree with me. If it was our decision, I don't think I'd want him back now.
Mate, I absolutely agree. I think, look, on a purely sort of romantic kind of storyline basis, yeah, fantastic. You'd love to have him back. He's the greatest manager we've ever had at this football club. He's done phenomenally well here in his 2 spells. So yeah, from that side of things, absolutely. But then when you actually kind of strip it back and you think about it and you think, right, what would Mourinho actually do with this squad? Yes, you could argue he'd install a winning mentality, but I actually think a lot of his methods now are perhaps outdated, certainly in terms of working with younger players. The way that he used to out players in the press and get a reaction from, that would be from seasoned pros. That was not going to really rub with younger players. I don't know. Look, I don't want to say he doesn't develop youngsters, because I think that's unfair, because he has done that throughout his career. But in terms of when you look at Mourinho and you look at clubs that he's gone to, he goes to teams that are ready to win now. He is a win now manager when you look at the way squads are built, etc. Like, it's all very well saying, oh, he'd love to get Jose back. Would Jose actually come back to this squad with this team as it is right now? Yes, he probably would, in terms of he's unlikely to get a job as big as Chelsea potentially with how things are going right now. But I just look at it and it's just got disaster written all over it. He's like someone like Antonio Conte, who, if he doesn't get what he wants, he'll throw his toys out the pram. He'll chuck the sporting directors under the bus. He'll constantly say how this squad's not good enough. I need more. And we're trying to move away from that sort of way of operating as a football club. We're trying to get away from constant turnover of managers. And you just think, right, if Pochettino doesn't last the season, or if they decide to part ways at the end of the season, halfway through his 2-year contract, you're looking at it and you think, right, if they were to do that, that would be a 6th person that's been in charge within 2 years of ownership. And we're trying to move away from it. So look, I get it, he wins, but Chelsea are not ready to win now. So what I don't understand why people, other than purely being blinded by the past and what he's done, why people think this current incarnation of Mourinho is actually going to win anything or do any better with what Chelsea have got right now.
No, I can't actually think of a manager that is worse suited for this squad than Jose Mourinho right now. And I say that, begrudgingly, because I understand these Chelsea fans that are saying they want Jose back. I get it. Like, I have that connection to him as much as I do. I've been to, a Stamford Bridge season ticket holder for 25 years. I've been through the whole thing. I get it. I have a complete connection with the guy. But you look at the squad profile, I was looking at the stats the other day about the Crystal Palace game. That was our youngest ever squad that we've ever put in the Premier League. 23 years, 21 days, ridiculously young. You know what Jose is going to do when he comes in to meet Bowley for the first time? He's going to sit in the boardroom and he's going to go, right, I need to sign 5 world-class players. And Todd Bowley is going to go, I'm not going to do the American accent, but Todd Bowley is going to go fuck off, isn't he? Like, he's going to literally immediately just tell him where to go. And I can't ever see that relationship going. And do you know what, mate? You made a really good point, where it was like, if you're going to sack Pochettino now, 6 months into a project, which obviously, what manager now actually is a project at Chelsea? You could question that very much. If you're going to sack, Pochettino and bring in Jose and expect that to be a project, then you've got something coming to you, because we all know what happens with Jose. It's brilliant in the first season. It's great in the second. And then, the wheels start falling off, and, maybe by 3 and 4, he's gone, maybe even before that, he's gone. So I just think we're in a position now where it would have made sense 10 years ago to do it again and rip it up and have Jose back. But I just think with the new ownership, with the new format of the management team and the recruitment, the directors of football, the squad, I can't see Jose getting on with any one of those elements. He's not going to get on with Bowley. He's not going to get on with the new directors of footballs and the sporting directors. And he's certainly not going to get on with a young squad that are impressionable and kind of do need an arm around them. And, look, Pochettino has had a lot of stick, but I tell you what he is pretty good at is getting arm around players and actually bringing them on a journey, right? You saw that with Noni, the way that he's, had him out of the team. There were rumours about his disciplinary record and he's brought him back. And now he looks like the player that we signed him to be. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is a clear example of how Pochettino has improved a player. And I know Jose will do that, but there are plenty of examples. And mate, we were talking about Kevin De Bruyne the other day on the kickoff. Like, you look at players that Jose has cast off, and there's a big list. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of players that he's misidentified or said that they weren't going to be good enough, or that they didn't fit in with his mentality, and they've gone. And I do really worry about some of those elements, some of those players now that are fragile, that need an arm around them. And you look at how they're going to succeed under a Jose Mourinho system, and I just don't see it. So bit of a mad one, but I still think those rumours are going to keep swirling, mate, for a long time.
They absolutely will, because if Pochettino were to go out of the Carabao Cup next week, for example, or we were to get knocked out of the FA Cup by Aston Villa, that noise then ramps up. I think from a Pochettino perspective, all he can do is just keep picking up results, because if he keeps picking up results, then that noise will get quieter and quieter. But if you don't pick up results, it will keep getting louder. But ultimately, like, I would look at it, and you look at the sort of the kind of managers that this ownership group and these directors have appointed so far in the short space of time they've been here, they're all project managers. And one thing Mourinho is not, he is not a project manager. As I said before, he comes in, he wins straight away, he makes a bit of a whirlwind, and then he fucks off after 2, maybe 3 years tops. That's not making progress. That's not making progress. That's not like, that's not what we're trying to build here. And ultimately, like, for me, I look at it, these sporting directors would never appoint him anyway. Like, if they were to appoint him, right, that would be the biggest indication that this club and these people running it have got absolutely no idea what they are doing if they were to turn to Mourinho. Because it's like, oh, we've tried to go down one path, project manager, Graham Potter, obviously Pochettino, and then they turn to someone at the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which is opposite to everything that they're trying to get from a manager they want to lead us forward. So, I mean, I don't trust these sporting directors to get an appointment right anyway if they were to replace the manager. And then, as I say, this would just scream as like, yeah, we've literally got no idea what we're doing, and we're just going to listen to the fans.
Yeah, we've got to decide what type of club we're going to be going forward, right? Because we've been a club for years where we've hired and fired managers. And look, there was a period of time where that worked. Do you know what I mean? There was a period of time where we got successive managers in, and there was a new manager bounce, and it worked. We got what we needed to. We had the titles.
Think how good the squad was, though. That's exactly all you needed. You just needed to drop someone in there. The Premier League wasn't as competitive. There wasn't as much teams spending the big money. You could pick the top 4 every year. It was okay to do that.
Yeah, was it Gus, or there was another interim manager that just came in and just basically said the team could basically run itself. JT Lamps, Drogba, the boys put in there.
Maybe Avram Grant or something?
Maybe Avram Grant. Yeah, there you go.
Or maybe Di Matteo.
He was slightly weaker.
Yeah.
They were all slightly weaker, and so I completely agree, mate. Like that squad was ready to go. Whereas now we just need the reason why I'm quite bullish on Pochettino is that he's the adult in the room now. Do you know what I mean? And he's actually one of the only elements of continuity that we've got. With the squad that we've ripped up, with the management team. Even when you're talking about a medical team, we've ripped up every element of the club, right? And so for me, there's an element now where you've just got to deal with the stuff that's going to happen. You're going to have to deal with a transitionary season. We knew that this season was going to be transitionary anyway, and you've just got to deal with it. And we have to be a bit more of a continuity club because, quite frankly, I don't think that hiring and firing system will work for us long term. And we've seen actually the form and the amount of trophies that we've won over the last few years decline in terms of the amount, the sort of cadence of them.
We've been a cup team since we won the league under Conte. We've been a cup team. We've been for me, mate. We've been on a decline in the Premier League since 2017 when we won under Antonio Conte. Yes, the Champions League's great. Yes, the Super Cup. Yes, the Club World Cup. Yes, an FA Cup here and there or whatever. But the reality is, like, those cups have papered over the cracks that we've been on a downward trajectory in the Premier League for a number of years now. We've been nowhere near winning the league since we last won it. Nowhere near.
No. And look, mate, there's a lot of people out there that want success immediately. Like, we live in an age of Twitter and TikTok or whatever, where things are instant. There's dopamine. Like, we have to have constant results. We have to see immediate change. Managers have to come in and hit the ground running. Every manager has to be an Eddie Howe or an Unai Emery, which I feel in the grand scheme of managers are outliers. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't see many other people making the impact that they made. And also there were circumstances within that club which allowed them to sort of have free reign and full control and basically create those successes. And I have to say that's nothing against those two managers because I think they've both been absolutely brilliant. But to expect Pochettino to come in to a car crash club like us when we were completely ripping up everything from every level of the club and expect him to come in and get us into the Champions League or challenging for a title, I do think it is short-sighted. And I am one of those people, mate. And for all my, for all the trouble of it, I am one of those people that just says we do need to have some continuity now with our team, and we need that sort of elder statesman to come in. And I would have actually given him an even longer contract because I do think, regardless of what happens, as long as we don't sort of slip below the 10th place, we're still in the cups. No matter what happened in the first leg of the Borough game, we're still in there. We can still get to a final. We're still in the FA Cup. Like, there is some progress there. That there is some general movement upwards. And I was looking at the stats. I'm sure you saw this stat as well, which was like, compared to the previous games that we had last season to this season, we've actually got 12 more points than we had at this point last year against the same teams that we've played. So to say that there hasn't been progress under this manager is unfair. Like, it is that simple. It is unfair. And I have to say, mate, I don't think under the previous regimes and managers that we've had in the last 18 months or so, with the players that we had, I don't know if we were getting through that Carabao Cup game against Newcastle. I don't know if we were progressing into that level. So I understand why there are some people out there that are questioning Pochettino because, look, and we'll get into this, but there's lots of reasons why you wouldn't like it. And I see that in the ground. There's lots of mitigating circumstances, but I do think there are other reasons, and more of those, why you would want to keep him.
Yeah, no, mate, I agree. I mean, if we just segue into Poch, and obviously, he's been here now about 6 months, roughly half a season. I'll be honest, mate, I think at the start of the season, with all the money we spent, with the quality of players came in, I think that kind of blindsided me a little bit and gave me slightly unrealistic expectations for the season. I said at the start, with the money spent, we have to be finishing in the Champions League spaces. That was my take at the start of the season. And I think that was a little bit irrational, not really sort of thinking was clouded by the amount of money we'd spent, the amount of players that had come in, and thinking that all these guys were going to hit the ground running and develop at a vast rate of knots, which they absolutely haven't. I think what we're seeing right now is, yes, we should be doing better in terms of where we are in the league. I think right now this squad for me, at best at the moment, is a top 6, top 7 squad right now. It's got the potential to be top 4 and challenge for the Premier League in years to come. I'm pretty sure about that. But right now, I actually don't think, when you rationally think about it, that we're a million miles away from where we should be. We're about 3 or 4 points away from 6th in the league. We're a couple points off 7th. Mate, that's where we're at right now. So when I look at it with Pochettino and I think, right, do I think it's a tough set of circumstances. Absolutely. Has he been unlucky with injuries in terms of not being able to use a lot of the money that's been spent? Yes, absolutely. It's a very difficult job. I honestly think I think he knew it was going to be difficult, but I think it's way more difficult than even he envisaged it to be. I honestly think this job at Chelsea, taking it over in the summer, the toughest job in football. I don't mean lower leagues, but in general, in terms of big jobs around Europe, this for me, arguably the toughest job there is, given all the turnover. And yes, in-game management has been poor in certain games. Yes, certain lineups don't make sense. Yes, certain formations don't make sense. I always feel he's a bit reactive rather than proactive in certain instances within games. But when I look at it, and I think we're on the verge of a Carabao Cup final, and we are a few points off 6th place come January with a vastly depleted squad in terms of injuries, vast amounts of inexperience. Is that really that bad?
I don't think it is. Do you know what I was just thinking about with your money point, right? Imagine Jim Radcliffe comes into Man United and he wants to do what Todd Boehly did at Chelsea, right? Where he guts that squad, right? First of all, they're not bringing in anywhere near enough money to what we were bringing in terms of our player and our playing staff, right? So that shows there was some good management going on in the previous regime, even though we questioned them with some of the signings that they made. The way that we brought in that money back is unbelievable. And then I'll tell you what, mate, try and assemble a Champions League winning or a Premier League winning or a Champions League qualifying even squad for the amount of money any less than ours. That it's impossible. Man United would be spending 1.75 billion on that squad. They would be spending way more than us, way more on wages because they're dysfunctional and their directors of football are not as good as ours. I do think you need to credit some of those signings that they made. You look at Jackson for the amount of money.
Some have been good. Some have been good.
Yeah, but and some haven't. But also, look at the actual money that was spent on some of those players, especially in the summer window overall. Like some of the players before, crazy money. Cucurella, ridiculous money, stupid signings, stupid amount of money, especially when you got Maatsen ready to go. Right, that was just insane. But some of them were good. Disasi, I don't think that was a crazy amount of money. Jackson, I don't think was a crazy amount of money. Now there's question marks about whether these players are going to ultimately be good enough. But when you're just talking pure cash and trying to build a Champions League qualifying squad, I honestly don't think you can do that for any sort of amount less than that. I really don't. No, unless you're Brighton and you just got a complete freakish luck and the best scouting department in the world. But Brighton still need 2 years to get the players up to Premier League standard. Caicedo went on a loan and they had to wait for Caicedo to come good. We don't have that luxury. We're playing players that are children. I always say that Pochettino is a bit of a kindergarten teacher looking after, youngsters, because that's what he's been given that squad. So just on a purely monetary sense, it's just mental.
I think one thing for me that's been a massive issue, and perhaps the biggest issue, is that the ownership comes in for criticism, and I've criticised them for things, and because it deserves to be called out for certain things that they've done. I think the biggest problem they've encountered is that they've made too many changes way too quickly in terms of wholesale changes. Now, I get it, you're going to want to bring your own manager in. I get it, you're going to want to do X, Y, Z. But when you make that many wholesale changes from top to bottom, and when you've got everyone in key positions learning on the job, Boehly learning on the job, Poch and the coaching staff to a degree learning on the job in this sort of environment, sporting directors learning on the job, playing staff learning on the job, when everyone in the key positions at a football club is learning on the job, that makes it that much more difficult as well. And look, the sporting directors, I've criticised them a lot because I think you look at it and I see it and I think, look, Paul Winstanley at Brighton, he's got a great eye for talent for sure. Lawrence Stewart would be great within a multi-club model. Joe Shields, I think, is a great talent spotter, and to be honest, out of the three, has probably done the best in terms of being instrumental in bringing in the likes of Cole Palmer, Lavia, etc. But I look at the sporting directors, right, and I think you guys have chosen to go down this path, right? This is the path that you wanted to go down, but I just think they've either fundamentally misunderstood what it takes to build a competitive squad in the Premier League, or they've just ignored that and thought they could do it this way. Because I can't believe, right, that guys that are, let's be real, good at their job. They might be doing that well here, but you don't get to this position by not being good at your job. How they can sit there and think that this was a squad that would be capable for qualifying for the Champions League this season, it baffles me, mate, because there's a reason why you've not seen anyone put a squad together like this in the Premier League, because A, it either doesn't work, or B, it takes multiple years for you to see that work pay off. So I just think, yes, they deserve credit for the likes of Malo Gusto, for the likes of Cole Palmer, etc. exceptional signings. But at the same time, when I look at it in a bigger picture, I think they've not done the most to help the manager by giving them a squad that simply is not ready to, or cut out to compete at the Premier League right now.
Yeah, the thing that I always look at with the signings we've got at the moment is Premier League experience. And you have to say, like, even when you're talking about players that have been in and around Premier League teams, like a Lavia or like a Cole Palmer, they certainly don't have a lot of experience or track record in the Premier League. And again, we've just got lucky that Cole Palmer is as brilliant as he is to have the impact that he has. And I have to say, I don't think a lot of people were thinking that Cole Palmer was even going to be anywhere near the first team when we signed him.
I was confused by that signing. I'm thinking, like, when we were linked with him when he joined, I'm thinking, well, he's not playing much at Man City, and I was then thinking, where does he really fit in here in terms of actually being a regular player?
And this is the key reason why I think we've got to give the manager a bit more slack here. And actually, rival fans don't necessarily see this because they see the big number and that we spent all this money and we should be getting results immediately. But Pochettino can only work with the tools that he has at his disposal. And he is basically bedding in an entire new team to get used to an entirely new league in a new system that he wants to play, and with the pressure of being at Chelsea Football Club, and with the pressure of having to qualify for Champions League and get through all the cups and everything that comes with that, right? And so, like you say, one of the most difficult jobs. And I do agree with you that we have to look at the directors of football and question the strategy. Now, there's an element of me which thinks, I don't know how much of that strategy is completely on their shoulders. I almost feel that there's a board level discussion which goes, sign me the best wonder kids from, world football, not just European football, from world football. Get them in the squad, put them on incredibly long contracts so they can never leave. And we'll get them on low wages because, young players are not going to ask for a lot of money. So they're, from an accounting perspective, which ultimately our board, that's the only thing they give a shit about, quite frankly, right? And that's true. So from an accounting perspective, it works beautifully. Now, when you're talking about on the pitch, it obviously isn't working how we expected or how they expected. And I have to be honest with you, I don't know how vociferously the board were anticipating Champions League football, because if they did vociferously anticipate it, then they've got a screw loose, because you can't give a manager the tools that they've given him and expect him to push right up there. Like, as you say, it would be completely unprecedented for a squad of that age to get anywhere near the title or anywhere near the Champions League places for that matter. Like, you look at teams of old and you sort of go, Man United, they had the class of 96 that came in, very young kids coming into the first team. They had a wealth of experience, probably some of the most unbelievable experience in the
Gary
team.
Pallister, Steve Bruce, Cantona, Roy Keane, like people Schmeichel, like people don't realize that like there was loads of experience and top level players there. Like I look at it and you just think, for us, I'm not saying this won't work in a few years' time, but you look at it and you just think fundamentally the strategy is completely backwards in terms of it should be the opposite way round. We should be blooding in sort of 2, 3, maybe 4 youngsters into a team with 6 or 7, 8 experienced pros. You look at the squad now, experienced pros. You'd say Raheem Sterling, Thiago Silva, and you put Ben Chilwell in there, and maybe you'd classify Reece James when he's fit. At best, we're looking at 3, maybe 4 out of a squad of 25. That's mad. Like,
Mate, it's never been done before. We've never seen any squad building like this in the Premier League ever. And that's why it could be anything. Like, next season could be anything. Next season, we could be right up there in the Champions League places, or we could be where we are. We've got absolutely no idea what's going to happen with this squad. And with young players, you're always going to have that fluctuation. You're always going to have that, difference in results. Like, you've got no idea how it's going to go. And that's why the objectives for the summer should not be wonder kid hoarding, because I feel like we've done that already. Like, if you look at the depth that we've got in central midfield, for example, there shouldn't really be a lot of
half these guys, I feel, won't even play for the club, mate. I'm honestly, mate, I'm convinced that Cesare Casadei probably won't even play for us. I'll be real. I wouldn't be entirely convinced that Andre Santos will even play for us.
Mm. Which is mad. Like, actually, if you look at them individually and you look at Casadei, for example, in pre-season, I thought he looked really good. Yeah. Thought he looked very solid. But look, he's not getting in, week out to the Leicester team at the top of the Championship, let alone a Premier League team. So again, like, for me, mate, we were talking about it earlier on about how Brighton do it. What Brighton do very smartly is they don't rush these players in. Like, they buy the young players and they absolutely want them to be first team players eventually. but they give them a few years. And that's why when you look at striker targets and Evan Ferguson is there, they're absolutely laughing in our faces because they're going, we're slowly integrating Evan Ferguson so that he will become an absolute out-and-out Premier League number 9, and we'll show you the reason why you're going to be spending 120 million pounds on him, because that's what he's going to get to. But we've given Pochettino a squad that needs to succeed immediately, and he needs to blood all those players. And it's just not the way you do things. And again, mate, this is another reason why you have to keep Pochettino, because you need someone that has the footballing brain and intelligence and has the continuity of knowing the squad and how they train and perform to go to the guys at the top and go, this guy is not performing in training. We need to get some experience in this area. You know, the fluctuations of the performances of Enzo and Caicedo sometimes are too different. So we need to have a Paulinho from Fulham in the team because we know week in, week out, that guy's going to give us a 7 out of 10. You know, so, you know, for me, that having that footballing brain and that level of knowledge of the squads, I think would be so stupid to offload Pochettino at this point, because I do think you need a grown up in the room when you're talking to those transfer lads, because the directors of football, they'll go for the shiny thing because they know if they get one absolute wonder kid and he, you know, does a Cole Palmer again, or maybe even more than Cole Palmer, they're going to look like absolute rock stars and their job security is done. You know, that no one will be questioning that.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Like, look, I absolutely agree with you, mate. I don't think there's any value or it improves anything whatsoever in terms of replacing a manager. Like, once that dopamine hit wears off after a couple of games or whatever, and you realise that the deep-rooted issues at the football club are still there, you're just having the same conversation, but you've got someone else sat in the dugout. And I don't know what it will take for certain Chelsea fans to realise that it's not always the manager. Sometimes it is, absolutely. But I think if you look at this and you can realise that this is not all on the manager. I'm not saying by any accounts that, we can just, you know, allow bad results to happen and we can hide behind a project and a process and that makes bad results acceptable. It absolutely doesn't. But at the same time, you know, starting again for what, the third time in less than 2 years, absolutely isn't the answer either. And if you think that, you know, people say, we need an elite manager, we need a world-class manager. I respect that Pochettino is probably not in the elite bracket with someone like a Klopp, a Guardiola, or Thomas Tuchel or whatever. But at the same time, right, let's think about this. What elite manager is going to come into Chelsea in these circumstances, under this ownership, knowing they could be out the door in 6 months and with the squad built how it is? It's not going to happen. It'll be another project manager. So people, when they think, we need an elite manager, we're not going to get one. Like, have you not been observing what this ownership are doing? We're not going to get an elite manager.
No, look, if in the summer, we're talking in the summer, right? Because that's when they're doing the managerial search. If you're looking at the options they had, and to their credit, they interviewed all the options. You know, they spoke to Enrique, they spoke to Nagelsmann. And actually, I'm very glad that we've got neither of those guys, because I don't think Enrique is tearing up at PSG, and Nagelsmann's at Germany, but he seems to have pissed off every single person he's ever worked with. Do you know what I mean? And he's another young, like, talking about young players. He's a young manager. You've got no idea, you know, what he's going to end up with. So if you look at the options, and actually in the cold light of day, look at who was actually the best CV and the most credible person to take over, Pochettino was the guy. Pochettino was the option. And actually, when he came in, there was some reticence. Look, he's an ex-Spurs manager. And maybe that's where the bias comes from. You know, maybe that if he'd had just a great career at Southampton, went off to Serie A and then went to PSG, we wouldn't be questioning him as much, you know. But because he, you know, went to Spurs and they're the perennial failures that they are, you know, we judge him poorly. But look, he got to the Champions League final. He did win the league in France, but you know, there's only so much credit you could do, you know, with PSG. But I have to say, like, he does have some very good accomplishment. Do you know what, mate? I was looking at that Spurs team that got to that Champions League final against Liverpool. That Spurs team was shit. I'm sorry. It wasn't great, was it? It was not a Champions League final, you know, team. So for a lot of people, I do think a lot of people get their being a bonnet about titles. And there always has to be this trophy. There always has to be this amazing trophy cabinet and these amazing managers. I do think Pochettino can end up being one of those managers that gets a trophy cabinet at Chelsea. Like, I honestly do feel that if you give him enough time. But also, you look at the context and the clubs that he's been at thus far, I think he's done a very good job at those clubs, and he's left them in a better place than when he started.
Success is not always winning. Like, you're not going to win at Southampton. No one wins at Spurs. All right, everyone wins at PSG, and like, you're judged on the Champions League. So that's kind of a bit of a unique environment. But you would agree, massively improved Southampton, massively improved Tottenham. Yes, PSG, no, the football wasn't great or whatever, and he didn't ultimately do what they wanted to do, but no one's been able to do that. So you look at what he's done at Chelsea, and look, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's amazing or anything, but to discard his work after 6 months or whatever it just makes no sense whatsoever. And actually, if you look at it, for me this season, right, I've always been a points over performances kind of guy. Just win. I want my team to win. I don't care how you do it. And when you're building something new, the performances will come in due course. But right now, I'll be honest, I don't think we're going to play that well this season. We've had a handful of games where we've played quite good stuff, but the majority of the time we've been average or crap in most games. But right now, what we're doing is, and we're actually in decent form. I think I saw something since the start of December. No team has picked up more points in the league than us, other than Liverpool. So only Liverpool have got more points since the start of December than us. And I think we've won 5 of our last 6 or something like that in the league. I mean, the only blip being the Wolves defeat. Yeah. So in terms of form and in terms of picking up points, we're actually doing all right. Yes, the performances aren't that great. Yes, it can be a chore to watch sometimes, but ultimately, football's a results-based business, and it's about winning. And we've played a lot, mate. I tell you what, we've played a lot better at the start of the season and lost games compared to now.
Yeah. And look, you got to caveat what you're saying in the form with the teams that we've had to beat. By no means are they the teams that are at the top of the league. But also, as you say, they were the teams that we were slipping up against. And we had the slip up against Wolves, but and we haven't looked good in all of the games. But I totally agree with you. And there were so many other managers where we were gritting our teeth and dealing with poor performances, but we were getting wins. But we were higher up the table. We were dealing with it. And I do think we've got the momentum now that we need, and we haven't had pretty much for 2 years. We haven't had the momentum that we're building now. And so you hope that we go into games like Liverpool or Spurs that we got coming up, and you hope that we're bringing, that level of performance against it. And look, let's speak no bones about it. We drew against Liverpool. We could have easily won that game, the first game of the season. We had that insane game against Spurs. Again, it could be even more convincing than that. We drew against City. We could be winning all of those games.
I mean, we were great. We were great against. We played Arsenal off the park for 85 minutes or whatever. Like, I know it's all lives and buts, but you look at it and you actually think, if you hold on against Arsenal, if you take one of your chances, for example, Bournemouth away earlier in the season when we drew 0-0. Yeah, we weren't great, but we should have won that game. We had enough chances to win it. And suddenly you're sitting in sort of 6th place. So football is fine margins. But I mean, talking of fine margins, let's move to the window. Obviously, we're a couple of weeks in now and not very much has happened. Obviously, everyone knows that we need a centre forward. January is obviously very tough to get it done. The 2 names, Ivan Toney, Victor Osimhen, for me, mate, I'll be honest, I think impossible this month. Virtually impossible. I don't see it happening. Everything that Thomas Frank is saying, everything that Ivan Toney's been saying, he's going to stay at Brentford till at least the summer, minimum. Victor Osimhen, again, yes, we know the release clause is there, but he's at the African Cup of Nations. Napoli aren't going to want to part ways with him. And if you're Osimhen, if I was advising Osimhen, I'm thinking, stay till the summer. You might be able to go to Real Madrid. You might be able to go to PSG. But you're going to have suitors, absolutely. So those are obviously kind of the 2 main targets. You then get sort of potential links with short-term options, which I'm always a bit reluctant to go with. I think we jumped at João Felix last year and it backfired big time, in my opinion. Yes, he done all right, but it's basically, I think we just were happy because he was just doing the bare minimum and everyone else was so crap. So let's talk the short-term loan options potentially. We've seen Man United do it with like Weghorst and Ighalo. It doesn't really work. It's very hard to do. There's very few players available that you could get in that would make an instant impact in January anyway. And you're probably looking at the Saudi market. Obviously, 2 names, Roberto Firmino, Karim Benzema. Mate, talk to me, Benzema. Obviously, for me, yes, if you look at the name in shining lights, amazing. But if you actually dig into the actual reality of it, for me, I don't think it makes sense. One, he's basically been on strike in Saudi for 6 months. Let's not forget the wages are astronomical. Al Ittihad aren't going to sanction a loan deal for him with paying all the wages. Plus, they're going to want a sizable loan fee. This is a 36-year-old going on 37. And for me, it just smacks of another deal like a Falcao, like a Pato, like an Aubameyang, like a Higuain. I just don't think it's the right thing for what we need to do. I mean, where do you stand on a potential move for Benzema? Do you think that it would make sense?
So it's really interesting, the striker position, right? Because I was very confident that Broja would be able to come back and make an impact at Chelsea. And maybe he will. Maybe with a bit of playing time and especially with Jackson being away at the African Cup of Nations. Maybe he will play his way into form. And I tell you what, I really hope that he does, because I was a very big fan of Broja, and I think his performances, at Southampton, proved to the Premier League that he can do it, and he could play for Chelsea. I have to say, I've been really disappointed with him though so far.
He's been poor, hasn't he?
He's been really, really poor. And do you know what, mate? It was the things that he was doing so well previously that he just isn't doing anymore. He isn't holding the ball up and slowing the game down up front so that players can get in and around him. He isn't controlling the ball. He isn't doing the sort of short layoffs that he used to do. So there's elements to his game that like a basic, number 9, centre forward stuff that he just isn't doing anymore. And so I was at the start of the window going, Jackson, he'll be gone for a month. Let's get him back. Let's see how Broja performs. And Nkunku will be fit, and then he gets that injury. And so now there's pressure. Now you can understand why there is 6 months loans being discussed, right? So I can understand why the directors of football are looking at it. And I also think that they're looking at the summer and they're thinking that Broja could potentially be sold anyway. So
I've always held that thought. I just feel that unless he goes on a ridiculous run between now and the end of the season, for me, he doesn't look like he's a required level for Chelsea. And if you look at it and you think, right, Nicholas Jackson's the one they're investing in, a big name striker is going to come in, and then Nkunku will be that kind of third option as and when. There doesn't seem to be a space for Broja. So I'd be shocked if he was here next season.
Yeah, 100%. So then you're looking at it and going, right, Jackson is still going to be out. Broja isn't performing. In Nkunku, we've got no idea on his fitness. He could be broken for the second half of the season as well, for all we know. I'll tell you what worries me the most is when players come back from an injury and get injured again. That is the worst possible sign. We've seen it with James Chilwell. Obviously Chelsea fans, we've been burnt for years about injuries and players getting re-injured, right? We've definitely run that gauntlet. So that does worry me. So now I am probably more on the side of going, I would look at a potential 6 months loan, or I would look at another young striker to come in, because especially if Broja is going to be out, you need that sort of conveyor belt coming through. So I understand why there are the options there, and there are 2 other sort of permanent signings that we'll discuss in a second. But to talk about the Saudi loans, Bobby Firmino, he lost it at Liverpool. They were very happy for him to go. He's only 32, but he doesn't even look as good as Benzema at 36. So for me, Bobby Firmino, I don't know how well he would fit in our system. I don't know how much he'd actually care. And so
yeah, I guess the only thing going for Firmino, in my opinion, is the fact he knows the league inside out. And if you're bringing someone in for 6 months, that for me, that's a big tick. But again, I agree with you. Like, would he, with his Liverpool links, would he actually would he come to Chelsea? And secondly, like, how would he fit in? Because he's not really yes, he has scored goals, but you don't look at Firmino and think he's a goal-scoring centre forward.
No, you don't look at him as a poacher per se.
No.
You look at him as a link-up man. That false 9 role that he played so well for Liverpool, but he had 2 unbelievable wingers playing off him that were goal-scoring wingers and really inside forwards. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, for me, mate, I just look at the Firmino deal. It's more. Do you know what? There's an element of scouting that you never would be able to get from stats and from watching players per se. It's about the mentality, how much they actually want to be there and how much they actually want to prove themselves. I feel that Bobby Firmino is in the stage of his career now where he doesn't need to prove anything to himself. Doesn't really care. He's gone to Saudi and got his paycheck, and will carry on doing that. And I can imagine him actually the next stage of his career going and playing in the States and being very happy there, because he's obviously not very happy in Saudi, right? So for me, that's just a non-starter. I understand why people are mentioning it, but it just doesn't work for me. Now, the Benzema one is one that we must talk about, right? Because I completely understand where you're coming from, but you look at Benzema and how much he was written off at Real Madrid, about how many people questioned him and his ability there. But he was by far one of the outstanding players at Real Madrid, and he really did sort of pull them by the scruff of their neck, to the Champions League titles and the La Liga titles that he won at the club, and he's won everything. And earlier on in the podcast, mate, we were talking about getting experienced heads in and proven winners, people that have done it before. And Chelsea have always done that. Chelsea have always had leaders, captains, and they've always had people that have won things and know what it takes when you have to hold up the ball and just slow it down for a bit because you need other players around them, right? And I do think with the number 9 position, the player that I would almost... Do you know what, mate? You're going to laugh at me, but the almost dream player is get Giroud back. Because
I was saying this the other day, right? What's kind of mad is Giroud still starts for us. That's crazy when you think about it. He absolutely does.
Yeah, and not only starts for us but would be our best number 9 by a considerable way. I
Yeah.
would say. I think Jackson's going to end up being an inside forward for Chelsea, and a very good one actually. I think he's going to be very good, but he's got to learn a lot about the number 9 position. And I tell you what, learning under Giroud wouldn't be a bad idea, would it? So for me, going back to Benzema, I can completely understand why they're doing it. I just don't know how the deal works, as you say. I just don't know how we're going to be able to prize him away from that football club and pay him the wages, especially when our board, the key thing that they've done is reduce the wage bill. And now we have the fourth highest wage bill in the Premier League for a reason now. And it's £100 million, I think, less than Man United's a year. That's an unbelievable amount when you look at how poorly they're performing.
Yeah.
So I can't see it.
I can't either. But do you know what, though? I agree that, look, what they're doing and it's much easier to get younger players on board with incentivized contracts, lower wages, right? But when you're looking at trying to convince top quality, experienced professionals that we need now, that are going to move the needle and make the difference to this team, something's got to give. A Victor Osimhen or an Ivan Toney is not going to come for 150k a week. It's just not happening. So we're in a position now where we're like, right, okay, are we only going to go for players that buy into our wage structure, or for the right player, are we prepared to break that wage structure because it's going to make such a big difference? This is where we're kind of at right now. And let's look at Victor Osimhen, for example. He's going to want more than 200 grand a week. Let's be real. Release clause reportedly around 103 million pounds. That for someone like him is not bad. My only issues with Osimhen potentially, and I'm not saying he's like Lukaku, but all the things that people are hyping Osimhen up for are all the things that Lukaku was getting hyped up for doing in Serie A. Let's just be real about it. I think Osimhen's more of a rounded player, better in the air. I think his finishing might be a bit better. He's a bit more of a complete player. But let's be real. All the same things that Lukaku was doing is what Osimhen's doing in Serie A, and everyone's lapping it up. And look, I don't want to say I'll be disappointed if we signed Osimhen. I've just got quite a few big doubts over him.
And well, look, mate, we've got a record. I understand your reticence, mate. We got a record of taking number 9s that were unbelievable and ruining them. So fair enough. We've been absolutely burnt from that perspective. I just think when you're looking at the market, he's the one sort of outstanding candidate, and you can they would break the bank for him because he would be their asset. If they sign him on a freaking 15-year contract like they're going to sign him to, he'll be their asset, and they'll want to see him play. So I get it with Osimhen, and I do think he's got that star factor. He's an amazing superstar in Nigeria, and the African connection of Chelsea has been absolutely mega for us. Think of the amazing African players that we've had. And so there's certainly that side of it as well, a brilliant marketing asset for us in that region. And, the board members are looking at that as well, quite frankly. But I do like the way that he plays, but you have to always say with these number 9s, and this is why I'm almost a little bit worried now to break the bank and spend this kind of money, is they will always have that price tag on them. Enzo, if we signed Enzo for £50 million, he would be one of the best players Chelsea's ever made. Yeah. Because quite frankly, he will have that sort of career. He's playing for Argentina in a World Cup final, at the age that he was young
player of the tournament.
Exactly. So look, I really dislike the hate for Enzo, because I do think he's one of our better players, and I think he will be excellent for us. But yeah, I do think when you're looking at the options that we have now, Osimhen is the one that really stands out. Let's talk about Toney for a second, because he's the other option that
he'd be my choice. He'd be personally for me. He'd be my guy, just based on the fact that he knows the league, the fact that also he's sort of the profile that's been a success at Chelsea in the past. I'm not saying he's similar to Drogba or Costa, but in terms of that physical play, that link up, he can hold the ball up. He's got all sorts of good finishing. I look at him as a complete striker. For me personally, look, there's probably not much in it. Is Osimhen a better footballer than Toney? Yeah, he probably is. But if we're talking in terms of fit and in terms of risk factor, I think Toney's a better fit, and I think there's less risk attached to it. There's absolutely risk with it for sure, but I actually think there's less risk than Osimhen, and I also think that he would fit our system better.
Yeah, there's the things with Toney that worry me is the price that we're going to have to pay for him. I don't think he's worth the money that they're asking for. I don't think he's worth 60 million, let alone 80 million. And you can argue with me to the cows come home. And a lot of Brentford's, fans would argue that he's worth that amount of money, and fair play to him for believing that. But, a 27-year-old that's coming into the prime of his career on a 1 year left on his deal by the summer when we'll potentially be signing, because I don't think he comes in January. I agree with you. I just don't think he's worth that kind of money. And it scares me. The other side that I will mention is that I don't know if you win a Premier League title with Tony up front.
No, that's fair. No, that's a fair point.
And so the thing is you can laugh at me for saying that I want to go along with the transition and that we should be signing players for the future. But you want to be signing players with the future that have got a potential to be world-class level players, Champions League winning players, at that point. So that's the thing, and why Tony wouldn't be my choice, because I don't think he's got that next level on that will push us. Because, I don't want to be sitting here in 2 years' time again, mate, and having a conversation where we go, right, we've got Jackson and we've got Tony, but we don't think that Tony is going to be good enough. We're still in fourth place. We're trying to push on to the next level.
That's absolutely a risk in it with Tony. Can he make that step up? You'd like, in theory, you'd like to think if he's banged in 20 goals in the league for a Brentford side that play very differently, that haven't got the same quality of players around him as he does at Chelsea, you'd like to think if he steps up to that team with better players around him, with more chances being created, you'd like to think he'd do as well. But ultimately, football doesn't work like that. So I agree with you on that front, that can he make that step up? Do you look at him as a potential Premier League winning striker, or someone that can take you into the latter stages of the Champions League? And I suppose right now, I'd have to agree with you. Despite me wanting him, I think there's definitely question marks over whether he would be that guy. And I suppose with Osimhen, there's potentially less question marks in that regard.
That's the key thing, mate. And look, Osimhen is a risk, and probably way more of a risk, probably double, triple the times of risk that what Tony would be. But the upside is so much more. And this is what the directors of football have to do, this gamble. And they did it with Jackson, for example, right? Jackson could have been a complete and utter flop. And in fact, a lot of people would argue that he is a flop. Right?
Could have been at Bournemouth if he wasn't injured.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think that he is a flop, and I feel that he's done enough now in a Chelsea shirt to show that he is contributing to the team. And so, I honestly do think that there'll be some surprises with our directors of football now, mate. Where they'll pluck a player out of nowhere that we won't have heard of, that has got some unbelievable stats, some record of doing it in a league that we don't watch religiously. And they'll plot them in the team, and they will be a good player. And so, mate, I honestly do feel with the directors of football now, they're hunting in a different level, a different pond than what we were hunting in before. They're not hunting in that level of, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Man City, Man United. They just signed the players that are ready right now, that everyone knows, that are household names already. They're looking at the level which is sort of like below that, where it's like they're going to become that player. So I understand why they're looking at players like Šeško, or they're looking at Gyökeres. Do you know what I mean? Like I completely understand why they're looking at those two guys.
Yeah, but do you not? But yeah, I get that as well. But do we not think, like, all of us are looking at it and thinking, the manager said it, fans are saying it, we need an experienced player. We need someone that's going to come in, and particularly for that number 9 position, because the number 9 position is the hardest one to fill on the pitch, right? In terms of a regular and reliable goal scorer. As we've discussed, the list is really short. Now, I think what we do in this position, whether it's now or whether it's in the summer, is going to give you a really good indication of what direction this project's heading in, and what kind of the sporting directors and the ownership are thinking about in regards to where we're heading. Because if we were to sign a Gyökeres, for example, I look at that and I think, right, okay, I'm not saying he's awful, but we're basing it off 6 good months at Sporting Lisbon from a guy that was playing in the Championship last season. So I look at that and I'm thinking, if you were to do that, that rules out you signing Osimhen or Tony or whatever. That would be the main guy. And I just look at that, and that's not moving it. And I know it's a very hard position to fill, and I know there's very few options, and I know it's going to be very difficult, and we might end up disappointed because we're not in a position where we can potentially compete with the big boys when we're going for against multiple clubs for a top player. I get that. But at the same time, I just feel like we need to be doing everything we possibly can to make sure we land an elite striker. And I'll be honest, right now, mate, 2 weeks into January, things might change in the summer or change towards the end of the window, maybe. But I'm looking at it. I'm struggling to see us sign a striker that's actually going to take us up a level right now.
100%, mate. 100%. I have to say, right, the only caveat to spending the amount of money that you're going to have to spend to get Osimhen is that you're going to have to sell someone. And the thing that I have constantly been racking my head around is going, would I take a Seshko for 60 to 70 million
He's not even
pounds?
starting for Leipzig.
He's not. But
No.
but hear me out.
Yeah,
Hear me
yeah.
out for a second. It's just like, would I take him with the potential that he's going to end up being a very good player, rather than selling Conor Gallagher? Because if you want Osimhen, we have to say this to all Chelsea fans right now. If you want Osimhen, one of your favorite players is going to leave, because that is how FFP is going to work. We've managed to dodge. No idea how we've done it. Fair play to the accounting legends that are running the club, because that's all they care about, as I say. But we've managed to dodge that. You know, in the summer, there are going to have to be players that leave if you want to spend £100 million on a striker, because we need to spend money elsewhere.
We've got too many players anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to have to offload them. So what I'm thinking now is, do we take a bit more of an unknown and keep Connor and other players that we're desperate to keep? And that's the equation that I'm constantly thinking, you know, is that what it's going to take? Because I don't want to see Connor go. I don't know. What do you think about Connor? Would you be happy to see him go if that was the conundrum? You go, you can get Osimhen, but Connor has to go.
Well, then you, if it was literally black and white like that, to get Osimhen, Connor must leave, then I take it, because we've got the cover in the midfield. But and Conor Gallagher as a separate issue, do I think he deserves to stay at Chelsea? Yes, absolutely, I do. Do I think he's had a good season? Yes. Do I think going forwards he's someone that will be a pillar of Chelsea's long-term success? No, I don't. Do I think he's someone that can be a very useful squad player? Absolutely. Someone that can come on and do a job in the last 20 minutes of a game? Yes. I look at him and I think his football IQ is poor. Where some players will take 1 or 2 touches, he's taking 3 or 4, and the attack's on. Or whatever it is. So, but you look at teams, right? Even looking at successful Chelsea squads over the last 20 years or whatever it might be, you've always got players in there, right, which might not be the most talented, might not be the most technically gifted, or whatever it is, but they serve a purpose. Players like Thiago, we used to have Thiago Mendes, the Portuguese midfielder. When we had Jarisic in that first squad with Jose, Alexi, like Schmertin, Jeremy, these sort of players, right? Guys that you look at and you think they're not that great, but for 10 or 15 games in a season, they will do a job for you. And I look at Conor Gallagher as someone like that. Okay, yes, the pure profits is attractive, right? Of course it is. But ultimately, to replace Conor Gallagher within the squad, unless you're going to go and buy a wonder kid, and even then, you're probably, if you get 45, 50 million quid for Gallagher, you're probably going to have to spend that, maybe more, to go and replace him. And I think for a squad role, I've got no problem with him being here. I just don't think personally he's good enough to be starting every single week for us. But I would absolutely keep him.
Yeah. And look, you know, maybe this is disingenuous, right? But I had a look at Lampard's stats when he was 23, right?
They weren't great.
They weren't. But look, in 2001, when he was 23, he was still at West Ham. That was the last season that he was at West Ham, right? They finished 15th place in that league. So fair enough, he wasn't getting a lot of opportunities, and he was probably playing in a 4-4-2 classic West Ham way. But he started 30 games in that season. He got 7 goals and 2 assists. Connor's already got 4 assists already this season, right? So, and Connor's 23. So I'm not by any means saying that Conor Gallagher is going to be Frank Lampard. But what I'm saying is if you're looking at the way that he has had to play, where he's basically had to be a destroyer, like that Pochettino is using him in that way, isn't he? He's basically saying
he's playing as a 10, but like
a 10, but a destroyer 10. He's not playing as a Juan Mata, is he?
A flair 10, no.
Yeah. He's not an Oscar, level, 10. So I think if you use that as a context and you then look at his stats about ball recoveries per game, he's double Caicedo's ball recoveries per game. So again, that's about their position in the pitch. And I still think that Caicedo is absolutely brilliant. And I still think that Enzo is absolutely brilliant. I actually do feel that they'll end up being the pivot too that we go forward, in the future.
Mate, I'd also love to see at some point when Lavia can get himself fit. I'd love to see all 3 of Enzo, Caicedo and Lavia on the pitch just to see what that's like. Because I actually think Lavia, when he's fit and when he's playing as well as he can play, I think that will make a massive difference to how Enzo and Caicedo play.
Yeah, 100%. So for me, I'm looking at those stats at the moment. I was actually a bit more recently, like a month ago, I was saying, do you know what? Maybe I would offload Gallagher if it meant that we could get Osimhen. But now I'm sort of thinking, I've changed my mind, mate. I honestly have. It's been a horrible moment because I've been questioning Conor Gallagher, and I hate that. But, I've sort of gone through that journey now, and I've looked at the stats and what he's done for the team, and, unselfish and actually cares, mate. That's the key thing, is I just want some players in the team that actually care. And Gallagher is one of those ones. Yeah, get what it means. They've been in the academy, that they've been there. And I don't feel that he is going to have a Mason Mount trajectory. I don't think he will do. I think he'll go to another team and he'll go up a level rather than go down. So you've also got to think about that. We're going to be strengthening a rival there. So look, mate, going back to what we were talking about, that is the only reason now, the only caveat that I'm saying maybe Osimhen is out of our reach, because I don't want to be offloading those level of players. We're already seeing Maatsen, he's going to be off. Chaloba's going to be off. Those are two boys that could be so good in our squad right now. If Trev was fit, he would be in that back position and being really good.
At the time, I was like, look, I'm not, for what it's worth, the Sassi's actually been half decent this season. But
yeah, I
looked at that the Sassi signing when it happened. I'm thinking we didn't need him. We basically created a Trevor Chalobah issue for ourselves for no reason. Like, is the Sassi doing anything better than what Chalobah would have done this season? Probably not. So I think we created an issue for ourselves there. Maatsen, for me, I think he had a very good season in the Championship. I think maybe people overhyped him based on that, because the step up is massive from Championship to Premier League, and then obviously playing for Chelsea. Obviously, I'm disappointed that he didn't get a go at left back, because I think he obviously has got good qualities there. Levi Colwell has done okay there, but he's been exposed a number of times. I'm disappointed he didn't get a go. But if you're going to get 35 million quid for him potentially, which is the release clause, then maybe you look at it and you think it's not bad business. But we're going to probably sign another left back in the summer, and you're thinking we're going to have to spend more than 35 million pounds probably to get a left back, when we could have had Maatsen if he was happy to be a rotation player. So I get it. I think some of the squad planning or some of the decisions that are being made are actually quite poor.
Yeah, 100%. And mate, look, you look at Maatsen and we're questioning whether he's going to be good enough. And I did this as well. He's just got an assist for Dortmund in his first game. Dortmund is not a rubbish team, and fair enough, they were in the Bundesliga against a relatively easy opponent. But he's starting for Dortmund the first game. They didn't bother about bedding him in slowly. He's starting straight away for them. And Dortmund are a very, very good side. So to question his level, I do worry about that. But yeah, I have to say, mate, there's some weird stuff going on. There are decisions that are being made purely from a numbers and business perspective, rather than from a, this guy is the same level of quality as this guy, right? And you're looking at, the player that Brighton just signed as their left back, Barco. You can argue that Maatsen's a level above him, and we were talking about signing that guy instead to replace him. So it's just sort of like, there must be some other stuff going on here that you and I, when we're not in the accounts, we don't get. But they're doing it for a particular reason, because it's nonsensical otherwise. It just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. Look, I think they've done some good stuff, but then there's also some stuff that's very head scratching and very much doesn't really make sense. If you're going to be selling players to then spend the same again or a bit more to bring in someone that might be a bit better in a few years, but actually right now isn't any better than what we already had. So yeah, look, I get it. They're doing different things. Yes, they're going to buy more clubs. There's going to be more places to send these players. A lot of these guys we signed, particularly the younger ones, we're probably going to spend 2 or 3 years in the multi-club system, and then they're not going to play for us, and they're going to be sold for a profit. I think we have to accept and prepare that that's going to be the fact of the matter here. But yeah, I just feel that when it comes to certain players, we're going to find out whether decisions are made for footballing reasons or whether decisions are made for financial reasons. And ultimately, for me, mate, I feel that the Maatsen thing, I feel if Gallagher leaves for whatever reason, those decisions are being made on a financial basis rather than a football basis. And when you start doing that as a football club, it's a little bit of a slippery slope for me. And you don't really know where that might end up going.
Yeah. Look, mate, there's a point for me where I look at the academy team that we could have produced. If you take every player that we've had at the academy and you put them in a starting 11, there is an argument, a very strong argument, to say they might be higher in the league than the current squad.
Yeah, potentially.
If you just look at that, and that might be a controversial one, but I honestly do feel that you could be right there. Look at Tammy. Tammy he's had his injuries, and fair enough, he's not tearing it up in Roma, but he was doing it in the Premier League, wasn't he?
He scored 15. I don't think anyone's scored as many goals for Chelsea since Tammy in that first Lampard season. No one scored more goals than him in a season since he was here. What I would say about the academy sales briefly before we round out is that, look, it's always sad. It's always a bit sad for fans when an academy player moves on. You're always a bit more connected to them emotionally or whatever. But I look at it and I think, have we regretted any academy sales thus far? At the time, I was raging that Tomori left. But actually now, when we've got the likes of Badia Shield, Thiago Silva, etc., that one doesn't feel as bad right now. Mark Guehi, another one. Disappointed at the time, but do we regret that one? It's, I would say, 50.
We were talking about signing him. We were talking
We
about
were
signing
talking
him
about
back.
bringing him back.
Yeah.
But then you look at Mason Mount. You have to argue on evidence right now. No, we're not regretting that. You look at Dominic Solanke. All right, yes, he's on a bit of a purple patch right now, but at the time, I don't think anyone was raging that Dominic Solanke left Chelsea.
Livramento for me is the biggest one. Livramento is the one that
yeah.
hurts the most, actually, because he's going to be brilliant for Newcastle, and again, he had to recover from a very serious injury, and he's doing that very well, doing that far better than any of our players with serious injuries have. So for me, you look at Livramento and you go, we could absolutely have him in the squad right now, and he could be starting.
I think absolutely, like, on the balance of things, I actually think, for what it's worth, we probably have got most of the academy sales right. There's always going to be a couple that are not gonna sit well, or they're gonna come back to bite you. But I think on the whole, if you look at the academy players who sold over the years, more often than not, I don't think we've ended up regretting them as such. But look, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the last few weeks of the window. We've got a couple of massive games coming up, which will have a big impact on how the season might pan out, a big impact on whether Pochettino is potentially going to be here next season. But we'll have to save that for another day. Could talk for ages. But Josh, mate, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure. Always great chatting all things Chelsea. If people want to check out more of what you do, they don't know where to find you, where should they be going?
Yeah, thanks very much, mate. Yeah, it's just on YouTube. Just search Josh Aveste, Aveste. If you search that, I've got a lot of Chelsea content up there, doing reviews sort of weekly after the game. So yeah, they can check me out on there.
Yeah, guys, make sure you check him out on there. Subscribe, show him some love. Loads of good stuff over there. Yeah, guys, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Smash the likes on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. And we'll be back with another episode soon.